Hey, I wanted to make this the first of a few videos on the notion of scapegoating, family and social scapegoating, and what these social dynamics mean, both for society at large and in all the sorts of small ways that can break a person. For those of you who don't know what a golden child scapegoat dynamic is, it's kind of a circumstance where there's an attempt to communicate to one child that they always do wrong or always hurtful, and an attempt to raise the other as an example compared to them. And it's a really compulsive attempt to distract energy and anger that is supposed to be there for the abusive parent, as well as to kind of teach the family members being abused and hurt that they can't rebel because they'll be like the scapegoat. So the scapegoat is always the one who is brave enough to question and give feedback to the narcissist. It's a terrible way of living growing up, and I know a lot about it because I grew up in a family where my father used the terms golden child and scapegoat in raising me. He called my brother the golden child and me the scapegoat. So and I'm going to post recordings documenting that, as well as recordings documenting the fact that he essentially treated the relationship as a psychology experiment. I don't really know another word for, because I'll show recordings about him administering placebos and stuff, recordings verifying that terminology comes from psychology literature. To grow up like that has had effects it's impossible to explain. I notice I just have completely different ways of interpreting things, and that people can't really understand the way I tend to view things. But it also just makes me sad because I see these patterns as relevant everywhere. Once the reason it took me so long to detect the fact that my environment was an abusive relationship is I saw this golden child scapegoat pattern is in schools, I saw in classrooms, I saw in the government. And it just seemed natural to me that every group would have a scapegoat. All that seemed right, but it was so similar to the rest of our society that, yeah. And I held on to this denial until about last year that I was being abused. I knew these words were terms from psychology literature, but I was taught I was supposed to be as generous as possible in interpreting people, and I just couldn't. But what I've seen, I am convinced that this form of abuse called narcissistic abuse is actually the thing our society is running on. Not that all families are like this, but if you're talking just a classical narcissist, not a cerebral one like my dad. And by the way, this word means a very specific thing, which is not well understood most of the time in terms of what it is. It's better to find as a pattern of behavior and certain kinds of manipulation rather than the person's personality. And not all these people are overtly self-obsessed or anything like that. My dad looks like a completely normal person from the outside, even though he's abused kids for his entire life. Starting with he was accused on his mission when he was 18. Yeah, but these patterns are how social control works in our society. Once you read about the patterns, you'll see every successful abusive relationship having them, and it's that in an environment where you can just go divorce somebody immediately, go live at home immediately, like unless you're going to use physical force to make somebody stay, the only way to get somebody to be willing to be abused is to engage in a very specific pattern of behavior that for some reason it basically always works. That's why I thought narcissistic abuse wasn't real, is I would look up something about it, and I would find these stories of people who had come out against a narcissist, and universally their story would be the same thing. It would be, nobody believed me, everybody, and this means everybody in the environment, lied about me, and the person got away with it. And I thought that's impossible because everybody would have to be in on it. It would have to be like an entire group corrupted towards defending an abuser. It seemed absolutely impossible. But it wasn't. And it's actually, I'll go deeper into the factors in other videos, but it's a very real thing. That it's partly because it's a very clever form of abuse. It's partly because it's a very clever manipulator. It's partly because of very flawed ways our society is set up in that always feed it. And I'm just one of the first people to be able to document and prove it if people look. But this has happened everywhere.